All right, good evening. This is Miss Cannon, and I'm going to do a quick Unit 6 study guide review. First and foremost, what you need to understand about the Industrial Revolution and why Britain was the first to industrialize is because they were the nation with the factors of production, which are land, labor, and capital. Capital is the money. You got to have money to build factories. You got to have money to have an entrepreneur who wants to invest in industry. Machinery is not cheap either. You also have to have the area to do it and the labor force. You got to have people who need to work, who are willing to work. Explain the effects of the enclosure movement. The enclosure movement in Britain is going to be when you have larger farm landowners who have more money, and they are going to buy out those smaller farms from the poorer, less fortunate farms and end up taking over all the farmland, forming a monopoly. Another thing that you understand about the cottage system and the factory system, I'm on number 3 now. Cottage system is done at home, hence cottage, okay? And it is usually handcrafted items. The quality is better, the prices are higher, and it is produced at a slower pace. Cottage industry is not having mass production. So let's review one more time. Prices are higher, quality's better, and there's less of the product. Factory systems, mass production. Instead of creating 4 sweaters in a week, you get 25,000 sweaters in a week, okay? Mass production, the prices are lower because there's more of it, okay? The quality is not the best. Think about how clothing that comes from Target or Walmart or any type of area like that may possibly be at a cheaper price because it's mass produced. It's distributed to the masses of people. Whereas if you go to a boutique where it's a hand-sewn dress, it's going to be $100 because it was done by hand, okay? That is the difference. Industry depends on what natural resource for the power of the steam engine. It is coal, guys. It is coal. And explain the pros and cons of lack of government regulation. Laissez-faire is going to be a theory that Adam Smith discusses in depth. He's going to talk about how the government should keep their hands off of the economy and allow business to run on its own because it's cyclical and it works itself out, and that the government does not need to be involved. Nationalism. I'm on number 6. I hope you are. Nationalism is going to be the devotion and dedication to one's nation. Remember that a nation is identified by their culture, similar religion, history, all of that. The country is the area that they live in, and the state is the political unit or government that they all live by. What you need to understand is that nationalism will influence World War I. Why? Because nations are not going to want to associate with other nations. And the prime example in World War I is Austria-Hungary and how they try to create an empire by taking over areas in the Balkans like Serbia. Serbia wants to be their own nation and create other nations in the Balkan Peninsula. And Austria-Hungary says, no, be part of our empire. We want you to belong to us and we're going to take you over. When you have nationalism, you have culture, you have pride. Those two cultures don't mix. They don't have a background or history or similar culture, so they're not going to want to be part of Austria-Hungary, and this will cause tension that will ultimately rise and create World War I, especially with the assassination of Franz Ferdinand. Imperialism is when a dominating nation takes over another nation for raw materials, material gain, and to strengthen their own power and their own empire. Prime example, Sepoy Mutiny. A sepoy is an Indian soldier that is in the British Army, okay, and they serve in the British Army. What's going to happen with the Sepoy Mutiny is that the British soldiers are going to create a cartridge that goes into a gun that is covered with pork and beef fat. Well, if you know anything about Hinduism and the Muslim religion, that is a big no-no. Cows are sacred and pork is not eaten in the Muslim religion or in Islam. So what you need to understand is that these soldiers will revolt against them and mutiny and go against this British army. It's like their last straw, okay? It ticks them off. What is the British Raj? It is the era of British rule in India. When you think of Raj, think leader, think taking over, and the British took over India for an era. For a long period of time, they ruled over India. 2 reasons why Europeans want to colonize Africa. There are several reasons, but the big one is raw materials, diamonds, coal, timber, natural resources. Africa had plenty of them. And also, they wanted land, they wanted labor, they had people that could work, they could build factories in Africa. Okay. Explain the open door policy with China. China and the United States are going to have an open trading relationship, and the door is open to the United States. But we're going to get a little touchy when other nations want to get involved. And China eventually is going to kind of be cut up like a pizza pie, just like Africa, where people are going to have. There's going to be the spheres of influence where it's like China is divided up by imperial nations that have taken them over. What is the purpose of imperialism? Is to expand your empire. The colonies that you create are to serve the mother country by providing raw materials and labor, and to help industrialize these European nations further. Meijing restoration occurs in Japan. Japan decides if you can't beat them, then you need to join them. And so they create this concept of, well, we're going to industrialize, we're going to modernize, we're going to be more like Western culture being Europe, because they don't want to be taken over or imperialized. What are the 4 long-term causes of World War I? If you haven't realized, I'm on number 16. They spell the word main: militarism, alliances, imperialism, and nationalism. Those are the 4 long-term. They're 4 main causes, okay? Militarism is the building of militaries, which will cause competition. Alliances are when countries start saying, well, if you got my back, I got yours, and this will keep peace because nobody will mess with us. Ultimately, alliances will be the downfall, because when one country gets involved, whoever's backing them up is in the war as well. Imperialism is dominating other nations for natural resources and to make your empire bigger. And nationalism is your devotion to your nation. It is your pride. I'm willing to lay my life down for this nation and my culture because this is who we are. Explain the short-term cause of World War I. What you need to remember is that Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary will be killed by terrorist group called the Black Hand, which is from Serbia. Big issue with Serbia and Austria-Hungary during this time is that Austria-Hungary has taken over areas in the Balkans, and the Balkan Peninsula has cultural groups who want to form their own nations, like Serbia and Romania and Bulgaria. They do not want to be part of the Austrian-Hungary Empire. So that is how it plays in nationalism, and what you need to understand is that short-term cause is going to be the assassination. Also, Schieffelin Plan. Schieffelin Plan was established by Germany, and what their game plan was to attack France quickly, because France is to their west and it's their neighbor, and they were going to attack them, and then eventually go after Russia, because they believed that Russia would not be able to come to the aid of France in time, because they took forever to industrialize, and it would take them a long time to mobilize their weapons and cross their nation to prepare to fight. It is an unsuccessful plan. It's not going to go very well for Germany. Why did both sides in World War I start to use weapons? Well, they needed new weapons because they dug these things called trenches and sat in them, and nobody was victorious. They had a deadlock. You should be very familiar with this concept of trenches and deadlocks, and no one's making any gains. So they started to create new weapons, tanks, gas, machine guns, so that they could attack and ultimately become victorious in this war. Woodrow Wilson. 14 points. There are 14 of them. I'm going to tell you the big gist of it. There's a big 3 that you need to understand. Number 1, reduce how many weapons nations have. If we all have less weapons, then we are less likely to get in a confrontation and use physical force and violence and weapons. Wilson's idea is that we'll use more talk to keep peace than combat. The second thing that you need to remember is that Wilson suggests that countries should have self-determination, which means, hey, the people of the country pick the government. It's a crazy idea. It's a great idea. And last but not least, Wilson is going to talk about the League of Nations, which will be an organization that will be out to keep and maintain peace and order in the world. You need to understand that the League of Nations is a wonderful idea, but it is a dog with a big bark and no teeth, all right? It doesn't have funding or the military to back up this idea of maintaining peace in the world, but later we'll have the United Nations, which will maintain peace in the world. Why did so many people in Russia support the Bolsheviks during the Russian Revolution? First of all, what you need to understand about Russia is they had a terrible monarch. They were dirt poor. They didn't have the same weapons as everybody else. They're behind technology-wise, and they had nothing else to lose. So when they look at the Bolsheviks, they're radical people who are trying to bring out revolution in Russia. It is something that these people can grab onto. It's hope. The communism sounds like hope and new change and better government. And so the Russians back the Bolsheviks because they offer something new and refreshing to Russia that can benefit their nation as a whole. And last but not least, the Treaty of Versailles, Germany, and Europe as a whole, which you need to understand, and I told you in a video a few days ago, Germany is completely punished, obliterated after this war. 414 clauses out of the 440 in the Treaty of Versailles talk about punishing Germany. Today in class, hopefully you read a document that talked to you about how Germany writes back and pleads with the Treaty of Versailles and the people, the Allied powers, to not crush them or disable them because they won't be able to function as a nation. What you understand with Europe is that Allied forces get to take the colonies of Germany, and all the other Allied nations get to rebuild, while Germany doesn't rebuild and slowly suffers and falls into a depression and oblivion. This is going to set up for another war, and I want you to think about why. Okay? This is your review video. It is quick, fast, and in a hurry, but you can listen to it as many times as you want. And I hope you have a fabulous evening. Please study. Go back and review over your notes. Have a great evening.